Welcome to Pull My Focus Adventures in the World of Digital Filmmaking. And back in June of 2017, I did a video on the Magic Lantern software. That's the software that's available for the Canon EOS cameras. And so my point was to show how much better the raw footage looked than the standard 5D Mark III or even my phone, which looks actually pretty damn good. The problem is I only got about half right. So with my current experience and research and a bunch of comments left on the video, I missed an important step. So in today's video, I'm going to go the rest of the route and show you exactly my process from using the 5D Mark III with the Magic Lantern software and using the RAW in post-production. Now, since I did that video, I have worked with RAW a little more. In fact, the last few sketches that I produced were all shot with RAW because I wanted to try the workflow of using RAW files and getting all the way through a project. Plus, man, once you play with RAW, it's really hard to go back to the native codec that's built into the Canon 5D. But first, just as a refresher, let's talk about what is Magic Lantern software. So Magic Lantern software is free downloadable software available that runs off your SD or CF card in Canon EOS series cameras. Some of the features include the ability to record 10 to 14-bit raw data right from your sensor. Now, natively, the Canon 5D Mark III only records 8-bit, so you're only going to get 8-bit values in your data. Using 10 to 14-bit, any color geek out there knows the more colors, the more bits, the more dynamic range, the better. So that's what we want to use. Of course, I must tell you that Magic Lantern software and the use of Magic Lantern software on Canon cameras is not approved by Canon in any way. It's experimental software. It could brick your camera and all that stuff, but ain't nobody got time for that, right? Let's get some RAW. Now, how I went about using this software was I used a specific build of the software, and I'll put a link to the file in the description, and it lets me record up to 3K on the 5D Mark III. I'll also put a link in the description below of where the software is available, so you can search for the latest build. I'm using the latest build, which is the July build 2018. And also there's a great video on how to shoot RAW and how to shoot using this crop rec profile or module in Vimeo. I'll put a link to that also in the description below. So now, with no further ado, let's get to the process that I use right now to import RAW, to use it, and to show you kind of what I missed in the last video. Here's the way Adobe wants you to import RAW into Premiere. What you're going to do is I'm going to go to the assembly workspace, and the only reason I'm using that is because it gives me a nice big media browser. I'm going to use my media browser to import it as opposed to dragging footage in from, say, the Finder or something like that. Go to the media browser, navigate to your footage. So we're going to use this guy right here. And the footage right now is in DNG format. A DNG format is a non-proprietary, open standard kind of format that everyone can create and write to and read. So if you have a Blackmagic camera, for example, you can output to something and then have that something output to DNG. But basically, DNG is going to hold the meta information from the camera, if there is some available, and all the bits, all the juicy bits. Anyway, we have our DNG file, and this is how we're supposed to bring it into Premiere. We go to the folder that the DNG file sits in, and the DNG is basically hundreds or maybe even thousands of individual pictures that we're going to string along into a video. So I'm going to right-click. Notice how it's not showing me 100,000 individual pictures. Premiere is smart enough via the media browser to see that it is a long video. So let's right-click and hit Import, and it will import the file. And here it is. Let's go back to our editing workspace, and as I double-click, the file is here. And it's kind of flat. It's got a lot of information, but it's still kind of flat. I would definitely want to color correct this. But this is where I went wrong in the last video. Basically, most people stop here. they'll say, oh, my raw footage is in Premiere. Great, so now I can drag it to the timeline. And if I do that the right way, yep. Now I'm going to go into my color space. And now I can do my color correction, right? So I can adjust my exposure. I can adjust all my things. And that's it. And I'm happy. Well, here's the problem. Premiere doesn't really interpret the information that's contained within that file the same way, say, Camera Raw will from Adobe or DaVinci Resolve will. And I'll show you what I mean. If I take this video right here, which was just pulled in, and I start messing with, say, some of the sliders. So there's my blacks, here's my exposure. Here's the real telling part. If I take my exposure, drag it all the way up, now I'm up at 5. Notice I'm getting a lot of fancy noise. I'm going to go 200% on this. I'm getting a lot of DSLR noise or just grunge here. And that actually would not happen if I was really using the raw data. So here's the first problem. When you import DNG into Premiere, you're kind of not using all the information that's there. Adobe knows this, but that's why there's a thing called Camera Raw. And Camera Raw is their module that allows you to manipulate a lot of cool data in the raw files. So let's just take a look at Camera Raw. So the procedure I should have used is the following. Step 1, believe it or not, do not load Premiere. Open After Effects. After Effects, like Photoshop, will recognize the DNG and then pop you into Camera Raw. And I'll show you why I'm doing it via After Effects in a moment, and I'll show you some other things that you may want to try to get other results. Okay, so here we are in After Effects. I'm going to say New Composition from Footage. So here it is. I'm going to do quick view to see, yep, this is the flower that I want to play around with. Now, usually this options isn't open. So I'm going to make sure this option is open. And guys, when you import a DNG, you can pick any one you want. You can pick any one of the series. Just make sure that Create Composition is enabled and Camera Raw Sequence is enabled so that it knows that this is a sequence that it should create based on these names that it got. Okay? So I'm going to hit Open and boom! Now we are in Camera Raw. We are not in After Effects yet. After Effects triggered Camera Raw to launch because it saw a DNG file which has raw information in it. So, why I'm in Camera Raw? Because Camera Raw has the tool set available for me to do really cool stuff with the raw file, which I can't do in Premiere. Okay? First off, let's take a look at the basic panel. Notice it's coming in as shot. White balance as shot. Well, as shot, how does it know what is shot? Because the camera provides the information to the raw file of how it was shot. It tells the raw file the ISO, the f-stop, the color temperature, all that neat stuff, and it passes it along to Camera Raw. Now Camera Raw, I can say, oh, it was shot at 5400. I could say, let's say it was shot in the shade. Bump that sucker up to 7500. Or flash, which is 55, or just a custom. I'm going to leave it as shot, okay? And I also suggest for you to do something. When you start playing with Camera Raw, maybe trust it. Just hit that auto button. Notice how I have default, which is this really flat kind of, this is how it actually came in the raw. This is how it actually looked. When I hit auto, boop, it analyzes the image and then it makes that histogram kind of equally spaced throughout the levels. It adjusts the exposure a little. It does contrast and highlights and all that neat stuff. Okay. So try auto first. Hit the auto button. See if it looks the way you want. I mean, you don't have to use auto, but I like to start with the auto and then finesse it from there. There's also the tone curves, and you can create a nice little S curve here to create more contrast in your image. Okay. This is really neat. It has sharpening tools and it has noise reduction. Now notice that there are some, like, if I zoom in really close, they're like vertical stripes here. weird vertical stripes. And that's actually in the raw file. And usually the tools available to bring the raw from the camera can get rid of this stuff. But if you're at this point and you still have it, you can use noise reduction at the expense of sharpening. It like kind of softens the image, but the noise reduction will make that stuff go away. As you notice, I bumped up the noise reduction. Once again, it does kind of reduce the sharpness a little, but it gets rid of some of that stuff in a critical moment. All right, double click that. We got rid of most of the noise. And one other thing I'll show you, you can play around with a lot of these, and there's whole tutorials on Camera Raw. But one thing I love is lens correction. Lens correction allows me to adjust something that I didn't even really know was there. If you look at the horizon, well, not the horizon, well, I guess it's the horizon, but the ocean is kind of curved. And that's not only because of the curvature of the Earth, that's also because of the curvature of the lens that I use. So I'm going to enable profile corrections here. And since my lens that I used was a Rokinon manual lens, it didn't pass the information over to the computer about what kind of lens that it was using. But I can tell it. And Adobe has these profiles set up. So if I say, let's see, lens profile, it was a Rokinon. So I'll go find Rokinon. And it was a Rokinon 35 millimeter, where is it? Yep, 35 millimeter 1.4 ASIF UMC. If I switch the profile on and off, that's without the lens correction. That's with. Without, with. Pretty neat. Now you don't have to do lens correction. But my point is, there's all these features in Camera Raw that Premiere doesn't even know exists. At least not in the current form of Premiere Pro. Okay? Once you're done with this, you can hit OK. You can also save this as a preset. If I wanted to save a preset here, I could just, boom, hit that, new preset, name it. And that means if I shot other things in that day with the same settings of everything, I can just bring those things in, set all these, and then apply my preset. I'm gonna hit OK. Once I hit OK, boom, it's into into After Effects as a composition, as a full video. From here, you can still do some fancy stuff with After Effects if you know After Effects. If you don't know After Effects at all, you don't have to worry about it. Leave it alone. What you want to do is you want to go to Composition, you want to go Add to Render Queue, or you can add it to Adobe Media Encoder. I send it to Render Queue, and then I use a output setting that I already preset for ProRes 422. That doesn't come with After Effects. You can create that on your own. Otherwise, you can use a different kind of output. But basically, you're going to render this file now. That's going to take some time. Okay? So we're going to hit render on this file. It's going to render a finished video in ProRes 422, which keeps all of our data, or as much of the data as I want, intact. And then you're going to bring that into Premiere. So I'm going to import this file, hibiscus flower raw render.mov. It's a ProRes 422 file. And let's take a look. Let's drag it to the timeline. Boom. I'm going to zoom this out. Zoom to fit. And now we end up with a much richer, more vibrant file than before. Remember this guy here? Well, let me reset that because that's not really fair. So here's how it looked when we just brought the CinemaDNG into Premiere. See that? And now here's how it looks after working on it from Camera Raw and then exporting it from After Effects, bringing it to Premiere. And I can still do some tweaks here. And notice something. When I crank this all the way up, and I zoom in to 200%, that noise is far, far removed. So you're not actually going to do a 5.0 crank up. If you do, you shot it wrong. But in comparison to you moving this to 5.0, look at that noise right there. And then here's the noise. It's no competition. No competition at all. So that's how you're supposed to do it. Using Camera Raw will allow you to really squeeze every bit of information out of the file that you so painstakingly did in Magic Lantern, and it'll just render beautiful files. Now, what I usually do is I'll do a lot of the color work, like corrections and making the image look nice. Maybe I'll desaturate it a little bit or not mess with the saturation too much in RAW, so that when I come to Premiere, after exporting it from After Effects, when I come to Premiere, I can do a little more tweaking to the colors. Also, if you are a DaVinci Resolve user, this entire workflow kind of goes away, because Resolve actually has some really strong tools for handling RAW files built into it. So when you import, it knows it's a CinemaDNG, and then there are many tools available in Resolve that kind of do what Camera Raw does. There's some cool stuff, there's some other stuff. So DaVinci Resolve people are probably going, ha, but I'm an Adobe guy. This is the way I have to do it with Adobe. So it's that final step, and it's a long final step, but it's that final step that separates the men from the boys kind of when it comes to using raw footage in Premiere Pro. Premiere just can't see all that cool data. So you're gonna have to import it into After Effects using Camera Raw to do all your color corrections, and then export into some format that you can use in Premiere. I tend to use ProRes 422 so that when it comes into Premiere, I still have a lot of the data, and then I can tweak some colors and put a LUT on it or something after the fact. There are some issues with Magic Lantern. It is experimental software and it's not vetted by Canon. I have noticed some problems. Number one, it's experimental software. And there were times where we shot stock footage and maybe it was too hot. I don't know. I got these weird glitches showing up in the footage on certain frames. And to get a weird glitch on a frame of footage that a client's paying for, not a good idea. Not a good idea. So that might have been fixed in a later build, but I was seeing them sometimes. Number two, raw footage is huge and expensive. And I don't mean as, making it rain expensive. I mean expensive in terms of storage and time. Raw footage is huge. If you talk about 14-bit uncompressed file, even a lossless uncompressed file, it's going to be a big file, okay? And there's a much higher post-production cost when using RAW. But sometimes at the end of the day, that's worth it. For me, when I shot my little sketches here and there, the scenes were short, and although the post-production took twice as long as a normal Pull My Focus episode, I loved the results, and I was able to control almost every aspect of the visuals. Final thoughts on RAW and Magic Lantern. Magic Lantern is a terrific package. It's a little scary to some people. Sure, okay. If you're a little sketch about putting extra software on your camera, don't do it. If you're okay with being nerdy and geeky like me and you want to try it out on your Canon EOS cameras. Post-production takes a while. And if you find any other cool ways of bringing in raw footage and doing it in a faster way than I showed you today, please leave comments down below. We will love to hear from you, and I'd love to learn from you guys. If you guys learn from me, I want to learn from you. Come on. What's that all about? Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to check out pullmyfocus.tv for all our other articles and videos. And if you're enjoying what we're doing here on the Pull My Focus channel, please consider backing us on Patreon for a very small donation of whatever per month. You are investing in our ability to keep bringing you these videos that are teaching you how to make great video. And with that being said, I am off. As you can see, I'm in a new office. We moved. I haven't done a video in 12 years. I forgot how to shoot things. Bye.